Good afternoon and welcome to Round the Table. I'm Ben John and delighted to be back with you for another week of Round the Table. I hope you've been having a blessed and joyful week. Delighted to be joined by my colleagues Tim Dieppe and Paul Huxley. Hi, Tim. Hi, Paul.
Hi. Afternoon.
Thank you both for joining today. As always, we always love hearing from you. Please do put in your comments, your questions, your concerns, your encouragements, whatever they may be. We love hearing from you and engaging with what you have to say as we think about some of the issues from this week. This week, Christian Legal Centre were in court supporting Ian Sleeper. He was arrested for holding a sign saying, "Love Muslims, hate Islam, Jesus is love and hope." He was arrested, detained for 13 hours, and was actually given a 6-month ban of entering Southwark Borough. And we are challenging that. The charges subsequently got dropped. We're challenging that, supporting him in challenging that of wrongful arrest. Tim, what do you think of this case?
Yeah, no, it's a free speech case, isn't it, Ben? You know, should you be arrested and detained overnight and banned from entering a whole area for holding up a sign like that? And I think the answer is no. Is that really a criminal offence to be holding up a sign saying "Love Muslims, hate Islam"? Much like we would say "Love the sinner, hate the sin" kind of thing. We say that kind of thing all the time. Love Muslims, hate Islam. You know, it's perhaps not the most winsome of messages, perhaps, and not a message I would want to go and say out on the streets. But the question really is, should it be a criminal offence, and should it be something that you should be arrested for, and should it be something you should be detained for and barred from entering an area for? And now I think that's way over the top here, particularly when you sort of compare it with, the obvious, slogans, anti-Semitic slogans that are being chanted around the streets of London every week for the last 6 months or so. And no arrests have taken place there. Nobody's been barred from going into London for doing that. So this is kind of crazy. And what he's trying to say here is that I want Muslims to know Jesus. This is why part of the slogan is about Jesus, isn't it? I want Muslims to know Jesus. And I hate Islam because it's stopping people knowing Jesus. And it's stopping people, in all sorts of ways. I mean, I took a call this morning about a student who has converted to Christianity from Islam and is very, very worried about the situation at home, and his parents have confiscated his passport and all of this kind of stuff, and he's had violent attacks in the past. This is a serious problem that we have here with Islam, and I think he did this shortly after the Westminster Bridge attacks, which were an Islamic-motivated terrorist attack, and he just thought, I want to go and say something. I want to go and say something about this. We've got to do something about it, and I want to love Muslims. And one way to love Muslims is to show them that the truth about Islam, what it's really like, and that it's bad and evil and so on. So there we are. That's what he did. And, I hope that he gets cleared, because this should not be a criminal offence at all, what he did. And, like I say, it's not what I would do. But, street preachers sometimes do things that I wouldn't do. Hatun Tash is very effective, and she wears a T-shirt with a Charlie Hebdo cartoon of Muhammad on it. Now, I wouldn't do that. But I'm not as effective as Hatun Tash is. She's seen like 1,000 Muslims become Christians, right? So, confrontation sometimes is absolutely the right thing to do. And it should not be a criminal offence. It is not a criminal offence to sort of be confrontational in a slogan like that, where he's very clearly not, the balance between loving Muslims, hating Islam. It's the ideology that he's, saying he hates, not the people. He's very clearly saying, I love the people, but it's the ideology. Now, people can say, I hate Nazism. Love Nazis, hate Nazism.
Well, in that case, I think you might get in trouble for actually even saying love Nazis in that case, which is kind of the strange thing about that, perhaps. We've got pictures, haven't we, of Ian with his messages. There we go. That's when he went back to it afterwards with a similar one. Have we got another picture? I think, yeah, that's the original one. That's footage from his actual arrest. So it There's a very simple little sign there, but you can see how big love Muslims is there. It's not like he was just hiding the love element of it, but he was putting that up front as well in that. And I think probably what happened is they just saw the word hate and thought, right, we're in territory of religious hatred and incitement to hatred, and it just sort of skipped a beat in the officers' brains, and they thought, right, we're into hatred territory. We need to shut this down because this is obviously hatred. And they didn't actually kind of think about the actual law and the freedom of speech.
What have you said? I just want to continue the thought experiment there, Paul. What have you said? Love anti-Semites, hate anti-Semitism.
Well, I mean, quite. I mean, I agree. I mean, I just think that I think that the love, the example you gave.
Are you allowed to hate anti-Semitism? Do you think? What do you think?
I think that we can hate any kind of ideology that is, like you were saying, bad for people, right? And anti-Semitism is bad for the anti-Semite and for the people who their behavior affects, as are all kinds of ideologies that are opposed to Christ. So we want to do that, but like God loves the whole world, like we're called to love our neighbor, we're called to love our enemy. Then the people who are enslaved to,
we can say things like, people do say, we hate racism. Yeah. Right. And then we might say we love racists. It's exactly along those lines.
Well, Carol Donaldson, great to have your comments. Hi there, Carol. She did comment, it's a bit of an inflammatory sentiment to approach Muslims with. She responds saying, anti-Semitism isn't a religious faith, though. There's no positive side to anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism is a ideology, and Islam, it's a religion as well, but it's an ideology as well. So I don't think you can really distinguish in that sort of way. And is there a positive side to Islam? I mean, what is the positive side of Islam? I don't know. I've not found it myself.
Well, also you'd also want to point out the links between Islam and anti-Semitism, right? We're not.
Well, yes, I know I would, and I've got an article up on the website called "Is Islam Anti-Semitic?" and I'm very confident that it is, because there's plenty of anti-Semitic stuff in the Quran and the Hadith and the Sunnah as well. That said, the Sirah of the biographies of Muhammad. So yes, there are links, anti-Semitism and Islam, and that is part of the issue with these protests that are going on. There's anti-Semitism in there, and I think quite a lot of it is motivated by Islamic anti-Semitism. So that's a real issue, yes. But anyway, we're kind of getting slightly off topic. We're meant to be talking about Islam, but it is related, because Islam is anti-Semitic, and anti-Semitism came up. My fault.
Hamster Box has said, I started digging into Islam about 5 years ago, learned a lot from the likes of Christian Prince, David Wood, Jay, probably Smith, and lots of others, but barely anybody in my church has the challenge on their radar. Well, Tim, you've got a great resource.
Well, Hamster, great to meet you. And I've learned a lot from David Wood and Jay Smith as well, and lots of other resources as well. And we've put up an article today that I wrote called The Challenge of Islam. I just wanted to, I actually wrote an article about the Challenge of Islam back in 2017, and it's the Challenge of Islam in the UK. And I just wanted to highlight the sort of catalogue, all of the sort of issues that have shown us what influence Islam has on the nation now. And one of the highlights, of course, is the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who wrote in the Telegraph in February this year. The truth is that Islamists, the extremists, and the anti-Semites are in charge now. They've bullied the Labour Party, bullied our institutions, and now they've bullied our country into submission. This is a crisis, and the fight back must start now with urgency if we're to preserve the liberties we cherish and the privileges this country affords us all, if we'd have any chance of saving our country from the mob. End quote. From Suella Braverman. Now that's, she's saying that, right? One can question why the churches aren't saying that. Fine, but there is a real issue, and for a former Home Secretary to say that is a big deal, and even saying that they're in charge now, that's a big deal. But what she's looking at is all of these protests. The police don't seem to be, the police are very happy to quickly arrest Ian Sleeper, who, by the way, if you watch the footage, there's nobody there. There's no crowd. There's nobody getting upset. There's just nobody there, and the police come and arrest him. When you've got 100,000 protesting about Gaza and and chanting anti-Semitic slogans, the police don't seem to do anything about that, but they pick on the Christian preacher over there instead. And that's part of the sort of double standard that's going on. People are afraid of criticizing Islam. Somebody told me the other day, I don't know if you've seen this musical, The Book of Mormon. Apparently it criticizes every religion going, but not Islam. Better not touch Islam. That's an example of dimitude. It's an example of sort of submitting to Islam and not basically applying an Islamic blasphemy law. We can criticize every other religion, but we can't criticize Islam. And of course, we've had 2 MPs attacked, 1 MP murdered, another MP who stepped down because of threats of attacks over Gaza and the Islamic reaction to that. The Islam vote, Muslim vote, has been very prominent in the recent local elections and is now got a lot of attention in the media for making 18 demands of the Labour Party if you want our support. So it's really affecting our democracy now as well. And if you look at this article, I write quite a lot about the integration of the cultural issues, the effect on education, the effect on even finance, halal food, which we're probably all eating on a weekly basis if you buy any chicken or lamb. And that's all beneath the surface, and above the surface we sort of see occasional terrorist attacks, unfortunately quite a lot that get foiled by security services. So I think Islam is a major challenge, probably the greatest challenge. And in fact, Sir Trevor Phillips, now former head of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, said back in 2016, I think it was, that the integration of Muslims is probably the greatest challenge this nation has ever faced. The hardest task, in his words, quote, the integration of Muslims will probably be the hardest task we've ever faced as a nation. And I agree with that. And I think that Christians aren't ready for it. I think Christians aren't talking about it. I think a lot of Christians still live in the 1980s and 90s when we were all worried about atheism. And atheism, hardline atheism has pretty much died in this country now. And Islam has very far from died. It's doubled or even trebled in that time. And the influence of Islam is massively increasing. And as churches, we need to start talking about it, teaching about it. We've put out a book. One of my books, Questions to Ask Your Muslim Friends, which is trying to equip Christians to engage in conversation with Muslims about faith. And I think that churches need to be teaching on this and talking about it and saying what Islam is really like and showing people what Islam is really like. Again, another one of my articles is Islam, a Religion of Peace. Got many, many thousands of people have read that article. Again, this is something that churches need to say and talk about as well.
I think it's tricky, isn't it? I mean, as Christians, we often buy into this kind of secular atheist sort of myth that we're all humans. We're all kind of, by default, we're just humans. And then what we do when we choose a religion, if we choose a religion, is we add something onto that. So some of us become Christians, some of us become Muslims and other kind of faiths as well. And so Christianity and Islam are sort of just 2 different flavors of religion. And we sort of buy into that mindset a little bit. And so then we look over at Muslims and Islamic beliefs and go, well, are they that different to ours? They kind of are respectful. They're against this kind of sexual activity, or kind of superficially, there are some, there are some similarities. And so we sort of assume that they're just like us, but with a different flavor. And maybe we strongly disagree with that flavor. Maybe we strongly critique their idea of God as not triune or something like this. But we sort of think that the differences are minimal, and therefore we kind of ignore the actual details. And just coming back to what you said about it being such a challenge, the thing when I read your article, which I really recommend everyone goes and reads, it's long, but it's really comprehensive and really helpful. It is that stuff on the integration. Just to read some of the things from it. The thing that really hit me was about the 7th of October. And only 24% of British Muslims believe that Hamas committed murder and rape in Israel on 7th of October 2023. So only 24% believe that, which I think is completely indisputable. And there are all kinds of other things. 29% of British Muslims have a positive view of Hamas. 32% support the introduction of Sharia law in the UK. 21% for polygamy. All kinds of things. But particularly that point about what happened in Israel. I mean, it's not the center of what we talk about at Christian Concern, although we have talked about it. That's a level of detachment from reality that is that indicates that there you know the prevalence in that community of beliefs which are just not based in truth at all.
Yeah.
And you know, if we were dealing with conspiracies from other sources like flat earthism, let's say, or like some like QAnon in America, far right sort of things, then you would see all over the BBC and all over the media, you'd see fact checks, you'd see like lots of really strongly pushed points to say, look, this is fake news that you're hearing out here. You know, we've got to correct this, and taking it really seriously. But if these falsehoods are driving so much of our culture's understanding and of for example, the Palestine situation, but also all kinds of other things, then I think that demonstrates how big a challenge this really is.
I by the way, I got somebody showed me a letter this week, written, I think, to students in Newcastle, addressed to Christians from Islamic Diversity Centre in Newcastle, and it says things like, as a Christian, you've accepted the Old Testament and New Testament. Now I implore you to accept the final testament, the Quran. As you've accepted the prophets of Israel and Jesus Christ the Messiah, the next natural step is to accept the final prophet of God sent for all mankind, the prophet Muhammad. I enclose in this letter a small leaflet about Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, according to the whole scripture of Islam. I hope you'll find it interesting and informative. This is, you know, we would call it evangelistic. It's dawah in Islam, sending out tracts and letters and saying, targeting Christians in particular, actually targeting Christians. It's addressed, dear Christian brothers and sisters, you know, and saying, you should really become a Muslim. You know, let us tell you about Islam, you know. And then how many students are actually, you know, prepared to answer that and know how to respond to that?
Well, I think in particular, it's sad that I do think Islam seems to be sweeping up lots and lots of young men. And Hamster Box, sorry to hear of the couple in your church who've lost their 21-year-old son to Islam recently. I think particularly, and you've written elsewhere, Tim, we'll need to move on shortly, but, you know, there are the various things that Islam is tapping into, which it's appeal and which is creating great appeal, particularly amongst young men who are see that the kind of secularism isn't giving any answers. And I think sadly many churches and Christians are afraid to be bold and courageous in what we speak in terms of a courageous faith. And yeah, so sadly Islam is spreading more than just immigration and procreation. Sadly, there is proselytism as well.
Well, and the whole Gaza thing is actually causing more people, you know, there's stories about lots of students in America in particular converting to Islam over the Gaza thing, which is crazy. And I haven't heard that in the UK, but all these girls wearing hijabs and stuff, and, you know, in order to sympathize with Gaza and so on. So yes, this definitely is they're very, very active in targeting young people and students, very confident and bold in their faith, which puts Christians often to shame. And the only way to rebut it is having a confident, bold, assertive Christianity, where we're saying, no, Muhammad is a false prophet, and Jesus did die on a cross, contrary to what the Quran says, and did rise from the dead, and is the final prophet. You know, so yeah.
So yes, do engage with the resources that we've put out. Tim's latest article, The Challenge, the latest resource and article, The Challenge of Islam, and do forward and share that as we seek to raise awareness about the challenge of Islam. Moving on, next week, urgently, 2 amendments have been tabled that could radically liberalize our current abortion law. Labour MPs, Dame Diana Johnson and Stella Creasy, both known to be quite prominent abortion activists within politics and in Parliament, have tabled 2 amendments. Diana Johnson's amendment includes the following clause: removal of women from the criminal law related to abortion for the purposes of Section 58-59 of the Offences Against the Person Act 1861 and the Infant Life Preservation Act 1929. No offence is committed by a woman acting in relation to her own pregnancy. This would mean that a woman could carry out her own abortion at any time for any reason up to birth. So that would be the impact of that amendment. Stella Creasy's amendment has said would effectively, the current law with abortion is that doctors need to sign it off up to 24 weeks, and another reasons need to be given as to why an abortion is taking place. They're trying to remove that safeguard, Stella Creasy is, by basically legalizing abortion completely up to 24 weeks. It's quite striking, isn't it? We sometimes forget about what the laws are. We're talking about the Offences Against the Person Act, 1861, a great act that has been preserving life. Sadly, the Abortion Act has undermined that, and what's led to so many abortions. But these would be big steps in the wrong direction in terms of changing the culture, changing what is allowed. You may remember the story of Carla Foster last year, who took abortion pills around, I believe, 30 or 32 weeks, and who was jailed, although then released. Diana Johnson's amendment is basically saying women should be allowed to do that. Women should be allowed to kill their own children up to birth. I mean, Carla Foster got a lot of support in the media, and it was portrayed in this particular way. But at 30 to 32 weeks, a baby is fully formed, and if born, would be healthy. Might have some complications, but generally fully formed and nearly ready for birth. And so these amendments are radically changing the law, and Diana Johnson's would be abortion up to birth for any reason. And so Christian Concern, along with many other pro-life groups, SPUC, CBR UK, and other groups are coming together, March for Life, coming together, united front to say no to abortion up to birth. And it's a great, beautiful display of unity amongst the different pro-life groups, who many of them all do great work, different emphases. And it's great that we're rallying together to oppose these amendments. Tim, what do you think about these amendments?
Well, it's kind of shocking, really. And they've been tagged onto the criminal justice bill, which isn't a bill about abortion at all. So part of what we've been saying and thinking is that these are out of scope of this bill, really, and should be ruled out of scope and shouldn't really be allowed as amendments to this bill. They're kind of hijacking the bill for the purposes of bringing in an amendment on abortion. And actually, the Home Secretary agrees with this. Robin Jenrick said in an interview just last month, I think it was, that is not the place to debate abortion. It ought to be a proper debate with a proper bill and proper scrutiny and all this kind of thing, not tagging on an amendment like that in that kind of way. And I think, but anyway, they have been tagged on. We'll see whether the Speaker selects them for debate, but that looks like very likely that they will be selected for debate. If they become part of this bill, it's shocking and appalling. And I gather that up to 40 Conservative MPs have said they will vote the bill down if these amendments pass and become part of the bill. And then, given that Labour doesn't support the bill and the opposition parties don't support the bill, it could be quite hard for the government to get this bill through, which is kind of a flagship bill of theirs that they really want to get through. So that's another reason why the Conservatives don't want these amendments added in to this bill. So we'll see. It's quite shocking that here we have two MPs who are so desperate to decriminalise abortion and make it legal to kill the unborn baby in your womb, in one case right up to term. Right up to the day before it's born. That's extraordinary, and the message it sends in terms of how our society values life, it would be very, very powerful, I'm afraid, and very disturbing. So it's great to see all these organisations uniting to put up a big show and say, no, we must not have this. And I hope that we don't. And I think we need to pray as well that we don't, and these amendments do not get added into the bill one way or another. That doesn't happen, and that that they don't get part of the criminal justice bill.
No, absolutely. Paul, why do you think it's important that people come to the rally?
I think the rally is going to be a lot of fun. I think, there are lots of organizations behind it who are all calling people out. And so we are going to have hundreds of people there, I'm pretty sure. And all on the same side on this particular issue for sure. And I think it's just going to be a bit of a party. Hopefully the weather's good, and we'll be doing something really important in standing for life in that place. It's going to be around lunchtime, which is when the MPs will turn up for Prime Minister's questions. So even if the abortion amendments don't get talked about on that day, then it's going to be a really key point to show MPs that there is a big number of people who are willing to come out and make this point and stand up for human life in this way. So I'm going to be there. I'm going to really enjoy it. And we may have to have further rallies beyond this one as well in the coming weeks for if these amendments come back at a different time. But I think it is going to be an enjoyable time for everyone who's there. So do come along, sign up on the Eventbrite link that we've put there, so that we know that you're
but we want to show MPs that there's a lot of people who care about this. Write to your MP as well is another thing, and tell them to vote against these amendments. Because we just want to show MPs there's lots and lots of people will be appalled if these amendments go through, and shocked and really don't want it. And we will see the voting records and decide who to vote for the election. And people who vote for this, Christians will not vote for.
It's a place where the discussion in Parliament and on Twitter and in newspapers is so far detached from the reality of what the public as a whole believe. Because when you talk to members of the public on the street, or when you do polling of people, then they're in favour of the abortion time limit coming down from 24 weeks to earlier. There's also an amendment doing that to 22 weeks that may be debated as well. But the public don't want to see children aborted at these late stages for sure. They recognise as a whole that if a baby could survive outside the womb, then there's no right for the mother to take its life. We need to get that baby out of there maybe and care for it another way. But there's a lot of sympathy for us.
And again, if you tell people to guess how many abortions there are every year, they guess hundreds, and it's 200,000. And when you tell them that, they're like, "Wow, that's got to be too many. It's got to be too many."
But we don't tell them, do we? It's not something that comes up in polite conversation at all, for understandable reasons. But that's part of the reason why we have such a disconnect between what people genuinely actually believe and what politicians say they believe. The public believes.
Yeah. Well, I was saying, one of the there are some of the pro-life MPs are tabling some amendments, one of which would remove Down syndrome from the list of conditions with which you can already have an abortion up to birth for. And I was just saying to some people at church last night, I was saying, you can have they were shocked that you can have an abortion up to birth for Down syndrome, but you can have an abortion up to birth for cleft palate and cleft lip. You can have an abortion up to birth for multiple gestation, which basically means you have twins and you decide you want to get rid of one of them because twins are too many. There's lots of these different things that so many people just do not know is happening or going on. And, I'm thankful for Heidi Krauter and her campaign about the downright discrimination of allowing abortion up to birth for Down syndrome. And that's probably one of the more common ones. Sadly, I think there's a few hundred abortions for Down syndrome each year. But the whole system, the whole framework with which we approach abortion in this country is awful. And it's important that we speak in opposition to what's going on, but that as Christians and as churches continue to speak for life consistently from conception to natural death. And so, please do join us at the rally next Wednesday, which is what's going to be, Lord willing, a lot of fun, but a powerful display, a voice about the value and the sanctity of life in the culture.
Just to give you another little detail, you explained what the amendment was in terms of saying that it's not an offence if a mother does this in respect to her own pregnancy. If you go back to the Offences Against the Persons Act and actually read it, that's exactly what it's there for. I mean, it's saying so. The craziness of that particular amendment is that you're leaving the Offences Against the Persons Act intact, which says this is an offence, and then you're saying this exact thing is an offence, and then putting another law in to say actually except if the mother takes her the life of her own child, which is exactly what that point is. So it's just nonsense law as well as anything else.
Yes. No, but it's not the only way in which the criminal justice bill is trying to be hijacked. And there is another amendment relating to conversion therapy, conversion practices. Paul, tell us about that.
So back over the last several years, then we've had all kinds of attempts to ban what is called conversion therapy or conversion practices in the UK. The UK government has its own proposals, which have been in limbo for many years now, really. There's a proposal up in Scotland that is being attempted to push through. There is a private members bill in the House of Lords trying to do this. And there is a private members bill in the House of Commons, all different sets of wording to target what they call conversion therapy or conversion practices. And now that's come to the criminal justice bill as well, in the form of an amendment. In this case, it's basically a copy and paste job from the private members bill in the Commons. And the thing that all of these have in common is that they're targeting something that doesn't really exist and isn't really a problem. There is this claim that the conversion therapy or conversion practices, which are broadly defined as any sort of action that seeks to change someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. That's how it's normally kind of explained. They're claimed to be harmful and terrible, and we need to stop it. Sorry, Tim, were you saying something?
Or suppress.
Well, yes, this is what I'm coming on to exactly.
Okay.
But the point is that none of these laws are actually explaining what is harmful that is not already banned. And when you keep on asking that, as has happened in the House of Commons on this exact same wording, then there are no really good answers. Because you can't actually point to harmful practices that are taking place or that aren't already banned, that need to be banned. And so it becomes really clear that this is not about harmful practices. This is about stopping certain things from being said. It's about stopping people receiving legitimate support that they want to support to live their life the way they want to live their life. And that's where we come on to that point about suppression. So some of these bills, including the private members bill that is being copied and pasted, talk about suppressing your sexual orientation or transgender or gender identity. So this isn't about changing from calling yourself gay to straight or transgender to cisgender or male to female, but this is about your experience of living out that identity. And this is where it really hits the road for many Christians, because many Christians would say, for whatever reason, well, some people have these sorts of temptations towards people of their own sex, for example. Some Christians experience those sorts of things, and that's clearly true. Faithful Christians will want to deal with that in some way. They'll want to perhaps reduce those feelings, but also they might just want to be able to resist that temptation. Not go after that person of the same sex and not have those kind of lustful feelings about them, not use pornography related to those people, etc. Now, with some of these bills, including this, then it would seem to target anything which helps people suppress that identity. So any kind of advice, any kind of guidance, any kind of course, any kind of support group that encourages Christians to resist those temptations would come under this bill or under this amendment. In this very particular one, for this criminal justice bill, it says this: conversion practices means any conduct or activities, absolutely anything, basically, carried out with the premeditated intent to change, replace, or negate an individual's actual or perceived sexual orientation, and so on. So the word it uses this time is negate. So if someone's got their identity of some kind, or even their perceived identity, then if you help them negate it, then you are in danger of being found guilty of conversion practices.
So that would include just to be clear, prayer to resist temptations.
It does, yeah.
It would include advice to stay celibate.
In this particular version of it, it says it has some exceptions to it, and it says no offense is committed where a person expresses a religious or other belief. Well, that's just an expression of belief. That doesn't save prayer, provided that it is not directed to an individual as part of a conversion practice. So it does say that kind of hints towards religion, but I think you're right. I think that prayer could certainly be seen as
so prayer, in-person prayer for a person would be caught. I'm confident of that, and personal advice to act celibately or live celibately would be caught. So just pause a minute. Just imagine this: it's a criminal offence to say you should be celibate until you're married between a man and a woman. A criminal offence. I mean, yeah,
I think you can disapprove or accept of those things, but if you gave them advice on how to stay celibate, then that would be covered, I think, under this.
Or advice to be celibate. Yeah, I mean, yes. Yeah. So yes, yeah. This is the proposal. This is what is actually being proposed. Basically, criminalizing Christian. What's the word? Christian conviction, Christian
discipleship.
Advice, Christian discipleship. That's the right word. Yeah, Christian discipleship, criminalizing Christian discipleship. And again, it's being tagged on to this criminal justice bill without proper debate, without proper scrutiny, all this kind of thing. We've been encouraged that there's been, when we first started talking about conversion therapy, not many people were on our side. And when the consultation came out, we were one of very few organizations that said no new laws are needed, and now pretty much everyone agrees with us. And all the Christian organizations agree now no new laws are needed on this. We've already got laws about harassment and victimization and things like corrective rape. Well, that's a rape. It's obviously illegal already anyway. So we don't want laws that are going to criminalize consensual conversations, and that's what this would do. And again, it's being tagged onto the criminal justice bill. I hope it doesn't get debated even, and if it does, I hope it gets roundly defeated. It was encouraging to see the private amendment made in the House of Lords had very strong opposition to it. Private members' bill, sorry. There are a lot of people saying this is the worst bill ever. It's got this draconian, it would cause so many problems and so on. And they put in these sort of disclaimers, so nothing's going to affect religion. But actually, if you dig into it, if you say to somebody you should live celibately, or you pray for somebody about their temptations, you could be criminalized for that. That is actually what would happen.
And I think it's safe to say this version of it is worse than that one, even.
Right.
I think it's so broad-ranging, and yet it's here in the criminal justice bill, and everyone is going to understandably be focused on the abortion decriminalization points. And so, we should absolutely be standing up on that point, but we also need to be making really clear to MPs.
It's interesting because one or two do sometimes talk about, there can be a religious exemption and things like that. I think it's realizing that the activists and the campaigners this really is what they are targeting. As in, I suspect some MPs are ignorant about what actually goes on in churches and don't have no idea what discipleship even means. But it's because there are these activists, campaigners, some of whom, one or two definitely, have come out of church Christian backgrounds and contexts, particularly targeting that. And so I guess the concern would be if a conversion therapy bill, so-called, comes maybe in the next government, whether there will be more momentum about what would be your thoughts on that, Tim?
Well, I mean, I think that's a real concern. I mean, I think the Labour Party, the Labour government, is much more supportive and has many more activists who want to bring in a bill like this. And so I think it's very likely there would be a conversion therapy bill that is brought in. I mean, what would be interesting to see is whether it's in the manifesto. It may even be in a manifesto, and then the government will be committed to doing it. I hope not, and we can resist, and the tide is turning. More and more people are coming against this. The Free Speech Union has made it a campaign issue on free speech because they've recognised it's about criminalising consensual conversations. Sex Matters also is campaigning against conversion therapy. The Cass Review said that threats of conversion therapy is causing clinicians to, feel like they have to affirm somebody in their gender, and that's a problem. And so, more and more people are thinking, why do we need a new law on this? But the activists aren't giving up. So we have to keep fighting. And so we will see, and it's all to play for. And even if a law does get passed, I imagine it would then be challengeable as a breach of human rights if somebody does get prosecuted or caught for this kind of thing. And I imagine that would actually have a reasonable chance of being successful. So there's all of these issues to play for in this. But the pressing one at the moment is this amendment to the Criminal Justice Bill, which we hope gets voted down or doesn't get voted on, whichever.
Thank you, Tim and Paul. It's been great to chat with you, and great to have you all joining with us for this week's Round the Table. As we said, do sign up to join us for next week's rally next Wednesday in Parliament. The details were posted earlier. It would be great if you were able to join us. Please do like and forward and share this video if you've enjoyed this. And if you've enjoyed this content and are looking for more help and support and resources as you seek to be faithful in the culture around us, then can I encourage you to sign up to join the Christian Concern family? You can do so at christianconcern.com/hello, where we send out weekly updates, news, action alerts, and prayer to keep you informed, updated, and equipped to stand for Jesus in the culture. Tim, Paul, thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week on Round the Table.
And on Wednesday. Some people.
And on Wednesday.